Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Help Systems helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements to the next level by pairing with Cobalt Strike, a threat emulation tool ideal for adversary simulations and red team operations. Learn more at securityweekly.com/core security. Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself. CyberGRX brings a revolutionary approach to third-party cyber risk management. Using sophisticated data analytics, real-world attack scenarios, and real-time threat intelligence, CyberGRX provides a complete portfolio analysis of a company's third-party ecosystem, helping the world's leading businesses prioritize their risks and make smart decisions. Interested in learning more? Head over to securityweekly.com/CyberGRX and demo the world's biggest third-party exchange.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us on April 14th to learn how to monitor your Wi-Fi network for attacks with Enzyme, a free and open source wireless intrusion detection system, with Lennart Koopman, hosted by Larry Pesce and Paul Asadorian. Then join Alan and host Tyler Robinson and Paul Asadorian on April 21st to learn how to gain visibility into your enterprise with Sysmon. Live attendees at both of these webcasts will have the chance to win a $100 Hacker Warehouse gift card. Register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, and now on to the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW266 to check out the news stories that we are going to be talking about today, along with my commentary. All right. And we've got some interesting ones here today. I'm going to be interested to get your both of your thoughts, Katie and Tyler, on some of these crazy. We got a few crazy ones today. We don't have a ton of funding. We don't have any acquisitions, but we've got a few interesting ones. So Island is this secure web browser built atop of Chrome. Just came out of stealth. I think we talked about it. Did I mention it here? 2 weeks ago. I forget the number of the episode, but yeah, if you just roll back a couple weeks, we talked about Island coming out of stealth with a $100 million Series A, and less than 2 months later, they've announced $115 million Series B at a $1.3 billion valuation. They're less than 2 months out of stealth, and they're a unicorn.
To build a browser.
Would you say, Tyler?
$215 million to build a web browser.
No, to build like the top part of not even the whole web browser.
Not even the full web browser, just to build an overlay to Chrome to secure it a little bit. This is crazy to me. And when you read the article, there's over 100 employees already in the company coming out of stealth. Since when is it stealth when you build a 100 employee base, 215 million invested, and then you come out of stealth? Haven't you been a company for a while by that size?
I don't know. Yeah, I think they have been a company for maybe a year or two. I think they were in stealth for a while, but
yeah, founded in 2020. So 2-year-old company, or maybe not even, depending on when in 2020.
Yeah, so 2-year-old company coming out of stealth now. By the way, I read the article. They're coming out of stealth on this A round, which that just tells me that they haven't been able to sell anything for 2 years, or they would have come out of stealth way earlier.
Well, except the article is saying we were very fortunate because of customer demand since it launched late in February. So I'm assuming they mean February 2021, not last month. I mean, maybe that's possible, but something's a little wonky here.
I got to tell you, though, like there's some positive signal here, too, because on one of the Slacks I'm on, with a bunch of CISOs on it, you can't throw a rock without hitting somebody who's personally invested in this thing, or at least considered it. So it's there's definitely a lot of people that not to say that legitimizes what they're doing, or says that there's market fit or all that stuff, but certainly there's a lot of excitement behind it. And look,
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with their tech. That's not what I mean by wonky. I just mean, if there are that many employees, if they were in stealth for that long, and then all of a sudden, whether it's 1 month or 13 months, to gain over 100 million more in funding.
Well, and it's the same investors for the most part, too, that invested in the first round. So I don't know. Do you like, is that really a Series B, or did they just extend the Series A to 215 million?
I don't know, man. This is just crazy to me. And they're selling a browser. So is it going to be a per user charge, $20 a user a year, or like, I don't know.
I'm thinking,
this seems so hard to pull off in today's world.
I mean, I went through this when I was at 451. There was a market for this, for browser isolation and for security focused browsers, enterprise focused browsers. And, you could easily say that was too early to market. But, the big competition here is good enough. And Chrome is pretty darn good. It's got enterprise functionality in it that a lot of people don't even realize is there. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with Chrome. There's even many alternatives out there built on top of Chrome already. And there's competition here as well. I forget the name of the competition, but there's not just one company in this new market here. There's at least two. Apologies, I forget the name, but the other one isn't nearly as well funded as this one. But they're both secure enterprise browsers.
So I am just baffled, man, because when you were at 451, I was at Forrester. I also covered this area as an emerging area when I was at Forrester. And I remember meeting with some founders and I can't remember the name of the companies, if it was like, I don't know, there was an armor company that was doing this kind of thing. And I thought it was really an interesting idea back then, but nothing solidified. It never got there. The market never really truly materialized underneath those companies. And they either faded away, pivoted, or got bought on the cheap. So why is now going to be a better time? Especially when you think of the attack vectors that are commonly happening right now. They're not like, sure, there's risks and attacks that occur in the browser, and we see those happening, but they're not the common ones, right? That's not where the vast majority of attacks and breaches are occurring. So why is this a $215 million investment with presumably over $1 billion? Well, it is $1 billion. It's a unicorn. So $1 billion or more valuation in a market that may or may not ever solidify and does not see significant breaches compared to other spaces. Feels too niche. So there has to be something else here we're missing.
I think there probably is, and I would speculate perhaps that the quote new thing, which isn't really new, is the hybrid / work from anywhere environment, and that's the argument for this versus what may or may not have happened 5/10 years ago.
Yeah.
Again, it's not exactly where we need to be focusing, but if you could make a credible argument saying, listen, this work style isn't going away, we have to be a lot more careful with people, and especially now that we're coming out of a pandemic into an endemic. Yes, that is positive thinking on the rise. And people are going to continue, they're not just going to continue to work from home, but they're going to start working from anywhere, which puts browser security more in the spotlight because of so many unmanaged devices.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just feeling a little bit extra snarky today, or whether it's the White Claw kicking in, or exactly what's going on with this particular one, but I'm just not buying it. I don't think I'm getting red arrow.
So I think some context that might help here is, I think the approach, is not so much making the browser more secure. So the first generation of those browsers that we saw came out in the age of clickjacking, of, you click the wrong link, go to a website, it could execute malware in your browser. And browsers are way more secure now. That's not a thing that happens very often these days. That's not the approach at all here with these. This is more like how many traditionally difficult security use cases are much easier if you're inside the browser. So if you think like DLP, if you think insider threat, stuff that's tough to do from a network appliance or even an endpoint agent, but if you're part of the browser, you can then maybe tackle some of these more nebulous, difficult security problems that tend to require you to be man in the middle and, breaking TLS and, re-encrypting, stuff in transit, like TLS inspection stuff is very difficult to do. And it's just, I don't know. I think that's the play here, is that like there's a broad number of things we can do with controls and use cases if we're in the browser itself. And the other competitor is called Talon. So it's talon-sec.com is their main competitor here, but both tagged as enterprise browsers. Should we move on?
Well, if it's the Talon Cybersecurity that I'm thinking, they have 43 million invested. They're Israeli company, if it's the one I'm thinking of. 43 million invested. So I don't know.
Sounds about right.
They've got whatever that is. What is it? 25%? No, less than that. They've got way less. Way less investment, and who knows? It's if this is truly a market that's getting there, it seems like they should go raise another 110 million really quickly.
And maybe we'll be talking about them in a few weeks.
Support.
I don't know, man. I'll put my vote on the board. We should have a big whiteboard behind us or something that has the names of all the new unicorns and the Tyler thumbs up or thumbs down symbol.
I'm not going to compete on that with you. No. Mm-mm.
I don't mind being wrong. We can put those votes out there. I'll publicly put them out there.
Fantasy cybersecurity startup investing.
Yeah, no, I'm saying I'm going to be wrong, Tyler, not you.
Well, I've been wrong a million times, so definitely don't invest based on my thumbs up or down.
like fantasy sports, but with cybersecurity investments. Is that what you're suggesting, Tyler?
Yeah, I think I might do it. Actually, I think I might get a whiteboard for back here for the next episode. We'll get it put on the wall.
I think that would be fun, because my call here, my take here is that this is still, they're still going to find that there isn't a great market fit and that it's niche. Like some people will absolutely use it, and it'll it's exactly what they're looking for. But I think it's going to be large company, highly regulated company, niche, and not as not as generally interesting as a product as these raises are suggesting it's going to be.
Sounds
I don't
good.
know. Maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe the Fortune 1000 is enough, right? I don't know. Or the Global 2000, whatever you want to call it. All right, so Bionic raises $65 million for application intelligence platform. I found this one kind of interesting. So they're an AppSec company, but their take is they basically you point them at you point their product at your application, and it maps out all the data flows, all the dependencies. It basically gives you kind of like this exploded view, like if you think of like a diagram of a car or something like that, parts on a car, like maybe if you're a mechanic or something like that, like some of the software you have is this exploded view of all the different components within a car, and like you can click on a component and get the detailed serial number or item number if you need to order a new one or something like that, and understand what the torque specification should be and all that. That's kind of what they're doing, but for applications. And Like it seems kind of funny to say like there's a lot of money in scanning an application and spitting out a Visio diagram, but I can't tell you like as a consultant how many companies I've walked into that really have no idea how stuff works in their organization, how data flows, a lot of that stuff.
So this one gets the Tyler thumbs up, Adrian. I'm giving this one the thumbs up, and here's why. Because I believe that the future of application development is in the, and I've said this many times on this show and other shows, the atomization of the application. Meaning we're taking what used to be one app, putting it in the cloud, breaking it up into 50 microservices or micro apps, and understanding how those things connect, how they communicate, how they interoperate, and what the security of those data flows and code flows is very different today than it was even just 5 years ago. And so this
super complex.
Really excites me. I think this one and tracking that on a graph-based system, which is apparently what it looks like they may have, gives you the ability to understand those code flows, data flows in a way that that we just couldn't before. It seems like a really interesting and unique way of doing application security. So this one gets the thumbs up from me.
And they paid the extra $3,000 and got the .ai domain extension. So they're Bionic.ai.
Yeah, that alone will double your valuation from Insight Partners.
Yeah, and it does look. I mean, it's one of those things that like we've seen products with some good graphics and stuff like that. Like it demos really well, But I think this is one of those where you would have to. I'd have to get hands on before I could really give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But I'm definitely leaning on the thumbs up side because this is difficult. Yep. This is really, like you were saying, Tyler, this is really tough to figure out without something giving you a map.
Yep. And I thought it was going to happen. I thought this was going to come on the back of the microservices management companies. I thought that's where this type of data come from. And it still might. And this could be an extension of a microservices management type company. But to be able to look at it from application-centric vantage point into the data and code flows, that is really a unique way of applying the visuals. So yeah, I mean, listen, I'm snarkingly, half jokingly giving these thumbs up, thumbs down on no true due diligence.
Right.
But that being said, this one does excite me, and I would definitely want to talk to them closer. It seems like it's really interesting.
And not only do they have the .ai domain extension, but they're using the term ASPM. So they're the latest jumping on the CSPM variation bandwagon. I think we had a company last week that was DSPM, and the D was data, and now this one is ASPM, Application Security Posture Management.
Well, so
ticking all the boxes.
I'm going to bring up an interesting point about that comment. The SPM SPM acronym or moniker. I think it's an interesting dynamic between and here at Jupiter One we actually have Sunil Yu as our CISO, and he came up with this model. But it's the difference between structural awareness and situational awareness, right? Where your SIMs are covering your situational awareness. But there's not much out there that covers your structural security, your structural awareness about your assets. And that's why I think you're seeing a proliferation of this SPM, right? Secure posture, the state of your environment. That's kind of been a gap for a while. And so there's a lot of companies trying to do different versions of that structural security, structural awareness model.
You know what the irony is there? You can't really have situational awareness without if you want to call it structural awareness. Like that.
Correct.
Anytime you're doing any kind of work in a SOC or anything like that, when you're looking at alert, the first thing you do is you go find context for it. You go look for that map that tells you, where is this happening? Is this happening at the edge? Is it happening on the inside? Is this a dev system, a production system? Like you're looking for all that context that helps you understand if this is, I need to wake somebody up or, nothing. So
yeah, and I can get on that. I can get on that soapbox all day for you, Adrian, because I think the reality is if you don't have the fundamentals of security, which is knowing what you have and how it's set up, and I'm sure Katie will agree with this, you can't do security on top of that, right? You have to know what you've got and how it works. And we've just never been in a situation. We're just now in a world coming to a situation where all that is programmatic. And that's really a cool state to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the latest breaches in the news, instruct us on how important understanding those relationships are. Because sometimes they're outside the company. Sometimes that structural awareness extends beyond the corporate borders. It's a very, very subtle Okta reference.
Yes,
that's what that was.
Yes, very subtle.
Even more subtle now that I've explained it. All right, next one. Aptega. It was hard to find details on this, but Aptega is an Atlanta-based. I don't think they're an MSSP themselves. It sounds like they build an MSSP platform that MSSPs would use. So kind of like, the first company that pops in my head is Alien Vault, as kind of building that platform that allows MSSPs to stand up quickly and easily. And that's, I guess the interesting thing here is they've been around for a while. So this isn't a VC round. This is a growth equity firm. So I don't know a whole lot about growth equity firms.
Yeah, it just basically means that there's some revenue there, that there's an actual business underlying that. And typically when you see growth equity, they're a little further down the chain in the size of the run rate. Now, if they are doing kind of an MSSP company and they don't have product driven revenue, the multiple is a little bit lower, which is why you might be seeing a little bit lower funding here, as opposed to product driven revenue with significantly high margins and high compounding growth rates, which is why they get the margins that they get. So I'm sorry, the valuations that they get. So I think it's just it's probably just an interesting investment in a later stage company that may not have the margins or compounding growth rate to necessitate a huge valuation.
Yeah,
it looks a little like one of the companies we talked about last week about automating cybersecurity and compliance frameworks, ITGRC type stuff with a platform. Haven't heard of them before. Interesting company. I do have to, give a little shout out though, because they've been around for a while, but their hires in the last 6 or so months to their executive team and management teams include 3 out of 5 women. So that's really nice to see.
Very cool.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Katie. 3
out of 5 of the hires were women, just to be clear.
Yeah.
For somebody who writes all day, I should be a lot more articulate, but I'm not.
It doesn't translate directly like from the fingers to the mouth. When you write, you get to correct things. Real time is hard. I'm glad you pointed that out, because typically when you say MSSP, most people tend to think in terms of detection and response. Again, that situational awareness platform that Tyler was talking about. The SOC as a service type of flow, but there are many kinds of MSSPs. This seems to be more of a GRC compliance focused one. All right, moving on. How would you guys say the name of this company? And it's bad. If I'm looking at if I'm on a podcast and I'm looking at a funding raise for your company, and I don't immediately have any idea how to pronounce it, that's a branding signal.
I would say Toddle.
Toddle?
Yeah.
So it's TODYL for folks listening or watching, but we'll go with Toddle, because I can't. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
And they can get in touch if it's wrong.
Yeah, they can. Now, in the past, I think early on this show, we had one that was just impossible to say, and it was back when Paul Asadorian was still the main host of the show. And I was like, they've got to have some kind of pronunciation key on their website. This is it's way too hard to say. And sure enough, it's one of the first things I found when I went to the website was an explanation on how to say the brand. And again, I'm going to say that it's terrible. Nobody should have to go to your website to figure out how to say the name of your company. But wow, look at what.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Go ahead. Look at what this company's doing. They're just like boiling the ocean here, and I couldn't find it, but I feel like we've talked to another company that's doing something similar. Where, and I haven't seen the details about what market segment they're going after, but I would assume it's small business. It's small to mid-sized enterprises, because they're baking everything into one product: EDR, next gen AV, GRC, managed XDR, SASE, SIM, all in a single product.
So this one's super interesting to me because, yes, they're 100% trying to boil the ocean. If you go and look at their website and look at the platform drop down, you see SASE, SIM, EDR, NGAV, MXDR, GRC. It's like literally, a who's who of what they could possibly do. Normally, that's an instant red flag for me. I just go, whatever, not interested. Like the branding is off, the ability to market as a single value is off. But what really has me excited here is who is involved in the investing. Stone Mill, Anthos Capital. I know those guys, both of them two separate entities. I know them both real well, and they are not dummies. They are very, very smart guys, especially Stone Mill. And so this one, there's got to be something here I'm missing, and maybe it's just a lack of go-to-market experience and how to position and message and create a a single purchase category that makes sense for themselves. But had it been some of the other investors we've seen that just like to spray and pray when it comes to their spend on their venture capital, I would have just kind of shook it off and been like, whatever, another company. But there's some interesting players backing this one for me that makes it worth digging into a little bit deeper.
So I worked with a couple companies almost a decade ago trying to do something similar to this. And basically what they would do, instead of the endpoint agent route, they, of course, this is a decade ago. Things have changed now in terms of, employees being spread out and things. But they would basically hand you a Fortinet firewall that was pre-configured to send all outbound through one of their data centers. So it was basically like a Zscaler for a small business, where they would have all these technologies and stuff like that layered on. And they could do that because they controlled all your outbound traffic. And, could do some really cool stuff with that. They could, put you through some enterprise level security devices and software products that the small business would never be able to afford. But this company can afford to do it, because 1,000 small businesses are coming through and they're spreading the cost over all of them. So I wonder how much white labeling is happening here, because it just seems like way too much technology for them to build their own IP for all this.
Great question. Tough to know without actually getting in there and chatting with them. And looking through their website, it doesn't really say a whole hell of a lot about how they do what they do. They just do everything. So, it would be worth a conversation for me.
So next one here, for All Secure, raises a $21 million Series A. Not going to say, that's a Series B. So it's a fairly small Series B, but knowing a little bit about the company, because we interviewed their CEO and founder, David Brumley, I think 2 days before Christmas, back in December on episode 255. They're not your typical AppSec vendor. So I'm not going to say too much about them, because you can just, if you're interested, go back, listen to that interview with David Brumley. Pretty interesting approach to AppSec. And the way I say it sounds like they have a platform that addresses all of AppSec. It's kind of niche. It's very focused on finding bugs, doing fuzzing, stuff like that. So it's not like a big AppSec platform or anything like that, but still very interesting approach. Don't know if any of you guys want to say anything about that.
No, I enjoyed that conversation that we had with David in December. There's some good people on the advisory board, including Christian Ryu from Veracode and some other big name folks over there. my only concern with these guys is that they don't go too deep on finding 0-day and actually help you secure your entire application at a broader level. If they can figure that out, they have potential.
And if I recall, he's a professor at Carnegie Mellon and the creator of Pico CTF, and puts on like big CTFs, and it does all kinds of cool stuff. Very interesting guy. This next one I found interesting. This is a Israeli cybersecurity startup called Hub Security. Does something very, very Israeli. I want to say, there's certain Israeli cybersecurity startups that just go really deep on the technical side. What's the right way of saying this? Deep on the level of protection. Where you look at the technology and you think, man, that seems really paranoid. I can't imagine who would need that. It's an Israeli startup. So once you put the context together, the only other company that I've kind of seen in this area was a company called Private Core, and Facebook acquired them. And again, they were also an Israeli startup focused on allowing you to run computing resources in hostile environments, basically, is I think the best way of putting it. They call it, what do they call it? What's the term? Confidential computing solutions. But if you think about it, like attacks where you can siphon the data off of RAM and get private encryption keys out of RAM. In these cases, with both of these companies, that RAM would be fully encrypted. And to explain how that works, you get into talking about how they actually run the operating system within the L2 cache, the CPU cache. It's crazy. It sounds like science fiction when you start talking about it. But I think what's interesting here is they're already a public company in Israel. I don't know anything about Israeli stock exchanges or what it's like to be public in Israel, but apparently they're delisting there to list on the NASDAQ here through a SPAC.
Wow. Obviously they must have some revenue somewhere to be able to have, a true publicly traded 1.3 billion or 1.6 or whatever you said it was, 1.8 valuation. For me, this is an interesting one because the depth of security would probably, creating a trusted execution environment type of model will probably put them in the government contractor cyber kind of sales. Right, because those are the guys that need
long sales cycles, 2-year sales cycles.
Yeah, and they need that depth of security, right? Not just surface stuff. And the reality is, if they can do it at that level, they can sell hundreds of million-dollar deal sizes in the U.S. to the U.S. government and things like that. Then maybe there's some value here. Now, going through a SPAC is just such an interesting way of going IPO these days. SPACs, if you look, I read something recently that said that the SPAC market, a huge percentage of them now, and I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere between 40 and 60% were below their original launch price, right? They're all underwater. They're all getting beat up. They're all too risky.
A lot have been undone completely. They failed and have been just pulled the plug.
Yeah. So, they pulled the ones you're talking about. I think are pulling the plug before the IPO, before the purchase occurs. They're the ones that have actually gone public are now below their listing price in a significant percentage of time. So, I don't know. This is interesting on many levels. I'd love to hear more about the tech. It sounds kind of cool, though.
Yeah, no, the one I'm thinking of was Complex, and I think that was after.
Interesting. Was after I hadn't read of too many, getting wrecked.
Or it might have been right before. I can't remember. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Nope, just drinking my drink. You're good.
Yeah, and it's one of the, I get the impression that they have this technology and this IP, not necessarily products that are, they can just off the shelf hand to somebody, but more like you tell us what you need to protect and we'll develop this custom solution for that product or that environment for you, kind of that approach where there's probably some significant integration and development work with every customer that they have.
Yeah,
but
this
certainly,
is definitely not an off-the-shelf. Anybody can buy it. Anybody should buy it. This looks to me like they're going very specifically after a very high level of organization, or like you said, government systems. This isn't going to be, an off-the-shelf product that any enterprise is just going to buy.
right.
So, I'm not sure about the rationale leaving the Israeli stock market to the U.S., but the U.S. government has a lot of money, so we apparently have the zoo over here at my house today.
All the animals want to be on camera.
Yes.
All right. So the next one, there's nothing particularly interesting here except the fact that this kind of confirms our unicorn count that we've been trying to keep up with. That we're at 53. Cybersecurity is at 53 unicorns, and then this article picks out 10 to watch. I'm not sure what the process was for picking those 10, but the only thing I found interesting here is that they interviewed Dave DeWalt for it, which I'll just leave it at that. I thought that was interesting.
Well, in the article, it says that one of the criteria for being included on this list was that the author had to speak to the CEO. So I don't know if that's connections or availability. So I'm sure this author will be doing more in the future because it only benefits him and the community. So that was one of the criteria, but a lot of good companies on here, a couple that I may question based on my history in the space. But otherwise, good names, companies doing good things, a nice broad range of categories represented here. So
a lot of cloud.
Yeah.
A lot of CSPMs.
Where all the growth is occurring.
Yeah, cloud, AppSec, Arctic Wolf is MDR, MSSP. Illumio is, I'm kind of interested to see what happens with Illumio. I get I don't know how much traction they've had, but microsegmentation very much seems to me like, it's kind of where NAC was in the 2008, 2009 era, where, I'm just not seeing a whole lot of organizations that have been able to effectively use that kind of technology. So curious what happens with that. All right. So I thought this was we've been talking about this, about how, are we in a bubble? Are we going to start seeing these crazy rounds drop down? And now we've got this TechCrunch Plus article from Alex Wilhelm saying, no, there is data showing a decline in the size of A, B, and C rounds. And honestly, like I would love for this article to be something I could get behind, but looking at the data, it just seems pretty shaky. Like he's only, so he's comparing 2 quarters, but only 2 months from each of the 2 quarters. There's just not enough data here. He's not doing any kind of historical look to see if Q1s are traditionally smaller than Q4s. It doesn't pass the sniff test for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the data analysis side of it, but I think you're absolutely spot on. I just went and looked at the metrics. I didn't look at the methodology, which I suppose I should do a better job of. But looking at the metrics, I think the squeeze is on. And what I wish you would have done is broaden the length of time, had deeper metrics like you're talking about, deeper time comparisons, but then also looked at D's, E's, and F's, because the later rounds squish first, and then that trickles down over time to the earlier rounds. And at some point it stops. And the question is, does A and B remain insulated from the problem, or does B get hit, or does A get hit, et cetera? So I think you'll see if you go higher into D's and E's, you're going to get even more compression occurring over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely.
And I think it's really important because I think there's so much available in media today that anybody can claim anything. You don't necessarily have to be fact checked. You can call it an op-ed. But to really be credible, you have to expose the actual data behind it. And if you're selectively choosing data, that automatically, at least for me, raises some skepticism about, is this true? Is this factual? If you're including, let's say, Gen Feb, well, maybe most of the closure, just like a regular sales cycle, comes in the third quarter of a month. Who knows? What if you're on a completely different cycle? So it'll be really interesting to see what the full data set is, because this is only painting a selective picture. And I think for the integrity of the market, we need to be a little more honest about what's going on. And if this does represent all of it, then just, give us that data. But I read this and I went, okay, this is an incomplete picture, and you can skew data any way you want. Yeah. When I've written things for companies, I've been presented data sets, and I've been asked, not outright, but asked to use the favorable data. That doesn't say lie.
I've been there.
But
I've been there.
You can use data that's favorable in any situation and ignore data that doesn't fit your purpose.
Your narrative, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So adding to this, there have been rumblings. I don't have a story to link to this, but there have been rumblings that late stage rounds from recent late stage rounds have been falling apart, term sheets torn up, and retrading deals at lower valuations and stuff like that. Typically by funds playing VC that haven't traditionally been VCs. I'll just leave it at that. But there are other signals that maybe some of this is shrinking. I don't know if you've heard similar stuff, Tyler.
I haven't. I don't have any anecdotal information that I can share. I mean, I have heard. I've heard some of those rumor mill stories, but nothing that I can attribute to an individual that I trust as a direct confidant in something like that. But it doesn't surprise me, right? As the markets collapse on the public comps, the late stage are the first ones to get hit. So that does not surprise me in the least. I have actually been reading more recently about kind of, what's the true impact of that. And I think the true impact of that is going to be felt by employees of these companies, employees of the companies that are now getting that late stage squeeze, because quite frankly, their equity is going to be worth less, especially if they came in late to the game and they're not an early founder in some of these overly funded companies. And I've mentioned it before on the show, that's where the squeeze is going to hit. Hiring is going to be very difficult when some of these overly funded late stage companies get squeezed down because there's no equity upside. They'll have to offer a lot of cash capital to keep people. So it's going to be interesting to see the impact on the individuals inside of these companies over time.
I very much get the impression that these are investors that kind of saw the money, saw the bubble and wanted to get in on it, and then are kind of jumping back out. Like when talking about this with folks, I very much get that. Like a sense that there's some irritation with fair weathered investors on the late stage side.
I wouldn't be surprised at that kind of commentary coming from founders at all. That makes total sense, right? They're getting verbal term sheets torn up in front of them, or even written term sheets ripped up in front of them because the world around them has changed, and the fair weather VCs. At the end of the day, VCs make money. They're there to make money. They're not there to be your friend, no matter how much they position themselves as helping you grow the business. If they can't return capital upward to the LPs, they're not going to put it in. That's it, full stop. And so as the market comps collapse, it's not uncommon to see stuff like this occur.
All right. The next story, pretty much the story is in the title of it. Number 9, over 90% of organizations had a security incident linked to a third-party partner in the last year. No one is surprised. The number sounds believable. Like most companies have tons of third-party partners. So the likelihood, and tons of companies are getting breached. So the likelihood that there's an incident linked to a third party is completely unsurprising to me.
Yeah, and I think the author of this is Cyber Risk Alliance, or at least collectively, right? Did I read that right?
Yes, yeah, that is out of a survey that CRA did. Yeah, so that would be Dana behind those surveys. Dana does a very good job with those surveys. It's hard to do surveys well, and I worked with her at CRA, and she's very quick to throw out suspect responses to surveys. So she knows what she's doing.
We can all agree that this is the perfect survey, right?
The perfect survey?
Not leaving out data is a good thing.
I'm just messing with Adrian because I can. But no, in all honesty, I'm not surprised, right? Third party risk is a real deal, right? Comes in through apps, comes in through configuration, comes in through partners, vendors. All sorts of stuff goes on in the third party risk world, and it's an extension of your landscape and your attack surface, and you have to understand it, you have to track it, you have to secure it and govern it.
Well said, Tyler. And the next one here, we were talking about when we were talking to Aaron earlier on the interview, whether or not we're going to see data from cyber insurance companies, and here we go. Coalition's first half of 2021 cyber insurance claims report has some of this data in it. Of course, it's not raw data, but it's still pretty interesting stuff. They've got some insights in there, like the big eye opener for me on page 19. Businesses, coalition insurers are 6.3 times more likely to file an insurance claim if they use Microsoft Office 365 versus Google Workspace.
Okay, so Microsoft is risky.
Yeah. Well, in my insight there, like for years we've been talking about why do all these scams get through Microsoft Office 365 and not any other email provider? Like, it's ridiculous the number of scams that make it through Microsoft's filters that don't in any other email account that I have.
So here's an interesting thing you could do with your awesome survey skills. Survey the demographics of O365 users versus Gmail users. Who are they? Ages, technology experience, etc. I bet you there's a huge demographic difference. How often do you email people at, Outlook email addresses versus Gmail addresses? And think of like the demographics of the people you're emailing, right? It's pretty clear difference.
Well, but it's not going to be office.com like it's going to be, like usually you don't know if somebody's using Office 365 or not unless you look up their MX records on their DNS. So this is talking about people that are using Office 365 like a. Sorry, go ahead.
But I think the argument still holds. I think if you were to break it down and look at the types of companies who are using M365 versus Google, and then from there look at the types of people at those companies, the demographics of the people at those companies, you would see a big difference.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, definitely. But I'm pretty sure I've seen some funny some memes based on what you're talking about, Tyler, like what your email address your email provider says about you. Like AOL versus Yahoo versus
Yahoo.com. Yeah, AOL.com, Yahoo.com. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, Proton Mail. Like it all says something about you.
Hush Mail.
Definitely. Right. Oh.
That's just
you look
at exactly.
You definitely look at somebody differently when they're using the Hush Mail. We're not trying to shame anybody. You can use whatever you want, but we will judge you for it.
Yes, if you know, you know.
You should use whatever you want. I think, from the Microsoft end, there certainly is an argument to be made that the deployment is wider, the target on their back is bigger, and so if there are more people coming at you, there are going to be more people getting through.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all to find that like Office 365 users came out of like were more likely to come out of large corporate environments, and they go to Office 365 because they're comfortable with Microsoft Office products, and they, it just makes sense because the licenses for Office are included with it. So that, I mean, but it would be interesting to see some survey results from that. All right. This next one's pretty interesting. I haven't had time to go through the whole regulation here, but proposed SEC rule. So we've been hearing about like a 4-day requirement if you have a breach to notify shareholders and the public about that breach if you're a public company. But now they're going deeper to saying, no, there's going to be some specific details you have to share if you have a breach.
And this coming on the back of the Okta timeline for the Okta breach, which I don't remember the exact numbers. Maybe one of you guys do, but it's either 30 or 60 days they said on that breach before they told anyone.
Yeah, it was it was like last week of January that they said the incident actually happened over the course of 5 days. And because it happened at what did they call it? A sub-processor was the term they used, a sub-processor. So I guess like like they outsource, or maybe it's like a reseller that does support for them. I'm not sure exactly how.
So a reseller of a contractor. Yeah. It wasn't somebody internal tech. It wasn't somebody on the Okta payroll.
But for that reason, they didn't disclose it. There was no 8K, and this is what they get, I guess. Like if you don't disclose an incident like that, and then it goes public, you don't get to control the narrative, and it gets to blow up in your face. And hopefully, you make better choices in the future. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and then the real question is this SEC change going to have any actionable impact? Is it going to have teeth? Listen. I'm an old man. I'm cynical. I look at these things, and I've been seeing them for 15 years more, right? And until there's actual fines that actually hit companies that are meaningful and not slapped on the wrist, this is going to be irrelevant, just like the rest of them.
Yeah, and I tried to get through it. It's 115 pages, and I haven't gotten through it.
The fact that you even tried makes you a better person than me, for sure.
I haven't gone through it, but again, the timeline worries me a little bit in terms of the details. I don't know exactly what the details are, but in 4 days, most companies aren't going to know the scope. I mean, is it one thing to say, hey, we had a breach, we're checking into what's going on? Absolutely. Should that happen? Absolutely. But to disclose any details before your teams or your external teams have had a full chance to investigate, I don't know how that's going to benefit anybody.
Yeah, it depends on how much you have to share, but I mean, certainly, like I wasn't going to talk about Okta here because that's not really that's not really this podcast. It's more of like a PSW thing to talk about the actual hacks. But there's definitely a conversation to have around how they handled crisis communications and PR. And I think they just bungled it like crazy. Like even if you don't know anything about the incident, you should have some boilerplate, that shows that you're transparent, that you're trying to protect your customers, that you're trying to do the right thing. And they did none of that. I think there was within a single
misstep in communications. And I think they probably should have been sooner. But on the other hand, if there's a requirement to disclose details, and again, whether it's just to the SEC or otherwise, that's potentially opening up a can of worms because you might not know that soon. Yeah.
I mean, so I think part of the problem here is they're like, well, we didn't determine, this didn't meet our definition of a breach. It doesn't really matter. Like once the public has a hold of it, once journalists have a hold of it, once, the cyber criminals are posting screenshots on Twitter, doesn't really matter what your definition of a breach is.
Right. The court of public opinion will decide what that is.
Now it looks bad when you're saying, "Oh yeah, we know about this. This happened 2 months ago. We just didn't tell anybody because we didn't think it was important." Well, now you look like jerks.
And the fact that they were or were not breached, whether it's a real compromise, attempted compromise, I'm going to, sidestep that. That in this day and age, it really shouldn't be a thing, because everybody, the larger you are, the more market penetration you have, everybody is a target. And, like we were talking about just a second ago, the bigger the target is on you, meaning the more customers you have, the greater your install base, there are going to be people who go after you. Huge companies, small companies, everybody gets attacked. It's just the way it is. And not saying that's good either, but it is the way it is. And there should be no, oh my God, this is a terrible company because they've been breached. I mean, look at Target. Target's certainly not suffering, and we're going back a ways to their breach, right? And that was more novel in the public eye. Nowadays, there's a breach of some major company all the time. So it shouldn't be we're hiding this because we're ashamed we got breached. Because if you have a really skilled attacker, it's just going to happen at some point.
And there's a magnifying effect here, because this is Okta. This is how you get into things. This is the product that you use, that lets you into all your other things. So what they do, like what they're responsible for, just enhances the concern around this. So it's going to be that much, bigger a news story when it's the little sign-on provider that you use to get into all your stuff. They're a huge target.
Right. Obviously, somebody's going to come after them. And it shouldn't be, I'm going to hide it because we're ashamed of it, because if you've got enough people coming after you, somebody's going to get in with enough time, enough resources. Apparently, this is boring my dog.
All right, let's get to the squirrel story here, and we'll wrap this up. Not a whole lot to talk about here. This is a long read, but I am a sucker for scam stories. And like, if you like reading stories about Theranos, about Fire Festival, about anything like that, this is a super interesting one. This is a fake design agency, and it's just always interesting to see the creativity, that some of these folks go through. So I guess one of the things I like about it is that you always see some level of fake it till you make it in any industry, especially with startups. And seeing how these scams work kind of helps you spot some of those red flags, that you want to be able to spot. Like, is this a real employee that works for the company? And gives you kind of that, and that's how all this started to fall apart, is one of their employees just, didn't feel comfortable. Like certain things just felt out of place. Gemma Brett was the employee. She was like, something's not right here. So she started digging into it. Sure enough, found that a lot of the employees were fake, and then contacted another employee. And then they both started doing their own investigations into the company that they were supposedly working for. And it's super interesting. You should read the whole thing when you've got some time. It's a good write-up.
Yeah, I think the worst part of this whole thing was that apparently what it seems like, based on this article and the interview they showed and the video in the article, was that he preyed on the fact that there were a lot of people out of work at the beginning of the pandemic who were desperate.
Yep.
And now you've got people who are literally going into debt. But you can see how this kind of thing, deep fakes are their thing. You can see how this kind of thing could easily happen in a remote environment if people aren't paying close attention because they're worried about themselves and their livelihood. And any desperate victims, really.
desperate and in need of work visas. That's another.
Yeah.
I've seen that as a technique to take advantage of somebody. Is, when you're tied to a work visa, like it's a tough spot to be in. Like, depending on the country, like if you lose that job or if that company goes out of business, you have a very short amount of time to secure another work visa with another organization, or you get deported.
The coolest part about the article is halfway down the article, there is a GQ magazine open with a photoshopped picture of the founder with like a blazer, wide open, hairy chest hanging out.
To the navel.
Or Massimo Dutti or Duty, I don't know how you pronounce the brand. That is just fantastic. The
probably fake brand.
The gall it takes to put that together so that it actually looks like you're a model in GQ. I 100% want somebody, whether it's the crack staff on the backside of the production here, to model that up for me someday. But I want to have a GQ spread, please.
It seems like this whole thing is predicated on the fact that the fraudster here is very, very pretty. He's a very pretty man.
Are you saying I can't be in GQ, man?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of a slap in your face.
I felt that way.
That wasn't directed at you at all. I'm just saying, like.
Yeah,
hey,
the way you pulled it off, Adrian. I don't know.
I agree. I agree with Katie here. I think I could pull it off, but I don't know. My man Adrian with the hair, I think he's well better suited than me.
Well, maybe you should contact Ali, Tyler, because apparently he's really good at making these ads, and he could do something for you. He's probably out of work.
You heard he's hiring, right?
I hear he's hiring. All you have to do is go 6 months without any pay, and you're good to go.
Sign me up.
If you need influencers. All right. With that, thank you so much, Tyler and Katie, for joining me today. I should probably do that differently. Thank you, Tyler, so much for joining me today.
Adrian, you're welcome. I'll join you any day you want, my friend. Sign us out of here.
And thank you, Katie.
You're very welcome. And Amber, thanks you for having her as a guest on the show.
Awesome. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will see you next week.